The promise that saved my broken marriage was written on a diner napkin, soft with grease, stained with coffee, and signed with hands that were shaking. I found it again this morning, tucked inside a recipe tin I haven't opened in years. The kind with a dented lid and a smell like cinnamon that never truly leaves. The napkin was folded into a tight little square, like somebody was trying to hide it from the world, or from themselves. When I unfolded it, the paper fibers nearly sighed apart. The ink had bled in places, softened by time, but the words were still there, plain, practical, almost stubborn. And I'll tell you what those words said before this story ends. I'll tell you why we needed them, what happened the night we wrote them, and how that napkin became the thin line between divorce and a life we didn't know how to build yet. I wasn't even looking for it. I was looking for a recipe card, my lemon bars, because my granddaughter, Claire, called last night. Her voice was small in my ear, the way a voice gets when someone's trying not to cry. "Grandma," she said, "how do you know when love is still real? Isn't that a question that can stop your whole day?" I told her I'd call her back after breakfast, because I didn't trust my own voice yet. Then I opened that tin, and there it was. The napkin. Waiting like it always had. People think marriages end with screaming. Doors slamming. Plates breaking. But ours was breaking in quieter ways, through unreturned looks, untouched hands, and conversations that never got finished. And the truth is, nobody saw it coming. Not our friends. Not our church ladies. Not even our children, not at first. Ray and I had been married 12 years when the quiet distance started. 12 years is long enough to learn each other's coffee order and short enough to still believe you'll get back to normal any day now. But what if normal is the very thing that's hurting you? Back then, our house had a narrow kitchen with a little window over the sink. In the evenings, the glass turned black like a mirror, and sometimes I'd catch my own reflection washing dishes alone. Ray would be in the living room, the TV on low, pretending to watch. He wasn't watching anything. He was worrying. It started with money, doesn't it so often? Ray worked at a plant on the edge of town. When layoffs came, they came like a bad storm, quick, loud, and leaving everybody pretending they weren't scared. He found work again, but it was pieced together. Overtime here, weekend shifts there, odd jobs for neighbors who paid in cash and gratitude. And I was tired too. Tired in my bones. We had 2 children then, Molly, 8, and Ben, 5, and I was stretching groceries like it was a talent. If you've ever stood in a store aisle doing math in your head like it's a prayer, you know that kind of tired. One Tuesday, I made meatloaf. The cheap kind with too many breadcrumbs. We sat at the table, the overhead light buzzing faintly. Molly talked about a spelling test, and Ben made a mountain out of mashed potatoes. Ray chewed without tasting. He kept glancing at the counter where the mail sat in a crooked stack. And when I reached for his hand, just for a second, his fingers flinched, like touch had become one more thing he couldn't afford. That's how it happened. Not with cruelty. With avoidance. We started speaking in schedules and necessities. Did you pay the water bill? Ben needs new shoes. I'll be late Thursday. And the words we needed, the real ones, stayed trapped behind our teeth. At night, Ray began falling asleep on the couch. He'd say, "I didn't mean to," but the blanket would already be pulled up to his chin like a shield. I'd stand in the doorway and watch him breathe, and I would feel lonely with a married name. Have you ever been in the same room with someone you love and still feel like you're across an ocean? Then the lies started, not big, dramatic lies. The kind that wear a sensible coat and pretend they're doing you a favor. Ray would say, "Everything's fine," the way people say, "Excuse me," just to get past you. And I wanted to believe him. Because believing is easier than digging. But life has a way of digging for you. One afternoon, I found a past due notice under the phone book. Not hidden well. Just tucked. The number at the bottom made my stomach drop. I read it twice, then a third time, like the ink might change out of mercy. It didn't. When Ray came in, I held the paper out. My hand was steady, but my voice wasn't. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't look at the notice first. He looked at me. Like he was deciding what kind of damage the truth would do. "It's handled," he said. That phrase, "it's handled," became the match that lit everything. Because what he meant was, don't ask. Don't look. Let me keep my pride. I should tell you something about Ray. He was a good man. Not perfect. But steady. He'd pick up a stranded dog. He'd stop for old ladies at crosswalks. He'd carry heavy bags without being asked. And he believed, deep down, that his worth was measured by what he provided. Not by how he showed up. So when he couldn't provide the way he wanted, he tried to protect us from the fear by swallowing it whole. But fear doesn't disappear when you swallow it. It grows teeth. The next week, we fought in whispers after the kids went to bed. Our bedrooms smelled like clean laundry and unspoken anger. The hallway nightlight put a thin line under the door, like the house itself was listening. "What else aren't you telling me?" I asked. Ray stared at the carpet. "I'm telling you what you need to know." And there it was. That sentence that divides a marriage into before and after. What do you do when the person you trust decides you're not strong enough for the truth? A few nights later, it happened, the night I still taste if I think about it too long. Rain was coming down hard, tapping the gutters like impatient fingers. Ray came in late, smelling like wet pavement and diner coffee. He didn't kiss me. He didn't look at the kids' drawings on the fridge. He went straight to the cabinet and opened it too hard. A glass rattled. I said his name, soft at first. "Ray." He didn't answer. So I said it again, sharper. "Ray. We need to talk." He turned, and his eyes were already tired in that way that makes a person dangerous, because they're one sentence away from giving up. "I can't do this tonight," he said. But I had a stack of letters in my hand. And my fear had finally decided to speak. I laid the envelopes on the table. Not neatly. I wanted the mess to show. There were 3 past due notices. Then a 4th. Then one from a loan company I'd never heard of. Ray's face went pale, and I knew, before he said anything, that this wasn't just a late payment. "You said it was handled," I whispered. He rubbed his forehead like he could erase the last year. "I thought I could fix it." "Fix it with what?" I asked. "More secrets?" That's when he said the line that still stings, even now, even after everything we survived. He pointed at the envelopes like they were my fault for finding them and said, "You're always looking for a reason to be disappointed in me." And then, worse, he added, "Maybe you're easier to love when you're not keeping score." It felt like the air got sucked out of the kitchen. I didn't yell. I got very still. Because when a woman goes quiet like that, it's not peace. It's the sound of a door closing inside her. I took my wedding ring off. Not to be dramatic. To breathe. The metal felt cold against my palm, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Ray saw it and flinched like I'd struck him. He didn't apologize. Not then. Instead, he walked down the hall, opened our closet, and pulled out a suitcase. He set it on the bed and unzipped it halfway. The sound of that zipper is something you don't forget. Molly's door creaked open across the hall. A small face appeared, hair messy, eyes confused. "Are you guys mad?" she asked. Ray froze. I swallowed my heartbreak and forced softness into my voice. "Go back to bed, honey," I said. "We're just talking." She nodded, but she didn't believe me. Children can smell a breaking home the way dogs smell rain. When her door clicked shut, Ray looked at me like he'd finally seen what was at stake. But pride is heavy. And once you pick it up, it's hard to put down. "I'm going for a drive," he said. "A drive," I repeated. "In this weather?" He grabbed his keys. His hands shook just a little. And I realized something terrifying. He wasn't going for a drive. He was going to disappear until the danger passed. Ray, I said, and my voice broke. Don't leave like this. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. For a second, I thought he'd turn back. But then he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, I don't know how to stay. The door opened. The rain rushed in cold. And I did something I had never done in all our years together. I followed him. I didn't grab his arm. I didn't beg. I just got my coat, my keys, and drove behind him with my headlights cutting through the wet dark. We didn't go far. Because when people are breaking, they don't usually go somewhere beautiful. They go somewhere lit up and ordinary, where nobody asks questions. The Maple Street Diner was open 24 hours back then. A low building with fogged windows and a flickering sign that buzzed like a tired bee. Ray pulled in. I pulled in behind him. He didn't look back. Not once. Inside, the air smelled like bacon grease and burned coffee. A jukebox sat in the corner like an unused memory. The waitress, Patty, took one look at our faces and led us to a booth near the back without saying a word. Bless women like that. The ones who can read pain and still keep your dignity intact. Ray slid into one side of the booth. I sat across from him. A laminated menu lay between us like a flimsy wall. Our hands were on the table, but they might as well have been miles apart. Patty set down 2 mugs. Coffee so hot it steamed the cold out of our fingers. Ray wrapped both hands around his mug like it was the only solid thing left. And for a long time, neither of us spoke. Have you ever sat with someone and realized the next sentence could change your entire life? Finally, I said, tell me. Ray swallowed. His throat bobbed. He looked down at the table and said, I borrowed money. How much? He hesitated, and that hesitation was its own betrayal. He told me the number. And I felt my chest go tight, like my heart was trying to hide. It wasn't just a little debt. It was months of panic made into paperwork. He'd taken a loan to cover the mortgage when the overtime got cut. Then another to cover the first. Then a credit card he didn't tell me about because he planned to pay it off before you noticed. I didn't want you to worry, he said. I stared at him and thought, I had been worried for months, and I didn't even know why. Ray's eyes were wet, but he blinked fast like he could keep his pride dry. I felt like a failure, he whispered. And when you looked at me like you were disappointed. I couldn't stand it. I wanted to tell him I wasn't disappointed in him. I was terrified for us. But fear makes your voice clumsy. So I said the truest thing I had, you made me your enemy instead of your partner. Ray flinched. And there was our marriage, right there on that sticky diner table, 2 exhausted people who still loved each other, but didn't know how to stop hurting. Patty came by and refilled our coffee. She set down extra creamers like an offering. Ray watched her walk away and said, almost to himself, I don't want to lose you. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt anger, because wanting isn't the same as doing. What are we going to do? I asked. Ray's jaw tightened. I don't know. And then he did something I didn't expect. He reached into the dispenser, pulled out a napkin, and flattened it on the table like he was making room for something sacred. He took the little diner pen, one of those cheap ones that never writes right, and tested it on the corner. The ink skipped. He pressed harder. I can't fix this with a speech, he said. So let's make rules. Real ones. Rules. Not romance. Not poetry. Just 2 people building a railing so they wouldn't fall off the edge again. Ray wrote the first line, slow and heavy, like the pen weighed a pound. No more secrets about money. He slid the napkin toward me. My fingers hovered over it. Because once you write something down, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. I wrote the second line. 2, we tell the truth the first time. Ray exhaled through his nose, like that one hurt. He nodded anyway. Then he wrote the third line. 3. No name calling. No threats of leaving. I stared at that one for a long moment. Because we had been threatening without saying it. Silence can be a threat, too. Add 1, Ray said. His voice was rough. Something we actually do. So I wrote. 4. Every Sunday night, talk and plan. And then, almost against my better judgment, I added one more in smaller letters. 5. One kindness every day, even when angry. Love survives on choices, not moods. Ray read it. His eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. Kindness, he repeated, like he'd forgotten the word. Then I said the part that made the napkin more than a wish. If we can't keep this, I told him, we separate. Not as punishment. As reality. Ray's face tightened, but he didn't argue. That's how I knew he was serious. He nodded once and said, okay. We both signed the bottom like it was a contract. My signature was shaky. His looked angry, hard strokes, heavy ink. And right there, in that booth under harsh fluorescent light, I realized something. Writing the promise was the easy part. Living it was going to cost us everything we used to do to protect our pride. We drove home in silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had edges. Shape. Like a road map drawn in the dark. The next morning, Ray made breakfast. Not a grand gesture. Just eggs and toast. But he set my plate down gently, like my feelings weighed something. And that's how the one kindness started, not with flowers, but with care. Sunday night came, and I wanted to pretend we'd forgotten the napkin. It's strange how you can crave healing and still fear it. Ray sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and 2 pens. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't sigh like it was a chore. He just said, okay. Let's look. He opened the bank statements. All of them. My stomach twisted as the numbers turned real. There were late fees I didn't know existed. Interest like a slow leak. I started to cry, not because of the money, but because of the months I spent feeling crazy, sensing something wrong and being told it was handled. Ray didn't defend himself. He said, I'm sorry. Then he said, I was ashamed. Then, hardest of all, he said, you were right. Isn't it amazing how those 3 words can heal something that 100 excuses only poison? We made a plan that night. Not a magical plan. A boring plan. We cut up 1 credit card at the table, plastic snapping like a small bone. We set phone reminders for bills. We called the loan company together and asked for a payment schedule. And when the woman on the phone sounded impatient, Ray didn't lash out, he squeezed my hand under the table instead. The counseling appointment came 2 weeks later. We almost didn't go. Ray sat in the car outside the office and stared at the sign like it was an enemy. I don't want someone thinking I'm a bad husband, he said. I looked at him and replied, then let's not be one. He swallowed, opened the door, and walked in. Some weeks were good. Some weeks were awful. Because when you stop hiding, all the hidden things start crawling into the light. There was a Thursday night when Ray came home and I could tell he'd had a hard day. His shoulders were up near his ears. His words were clipped. I asked a simple question, did you pay the electric? And he snapped, do you think I do nothing? The old pattern tried to grab us by the ankles. I felt my own temper rise, hot and familiar. I wanted to say something sharp enough to win. But then I saw it in my mind, that napkin on the diner table. No name calling. No threats of leaving. So I took a breath and said, I'm not your judge, Ray. I'm your wife. He blinked like he'd been slapped awake. And after a long moment, he whispered, I'm sorry. That was the work. Not grand romance. Just 1,000 small moments where you either reach for the old weapon, or you set it down. Forgiveness is slower than anger, but it lasts longer. We kept the napkin in a kitchen drawer at first. Folded beside the tape and spare batteries. Not framed. Not celebrated. Because it wasn't a trophy. It was a lifeline. Then life tested us, because life always tests you right when you start to stand up straight. It happened on a bright afternoon in spring. Ray's phone rang, and I watched his face change before he even spoke. It was his sister, Darlene. Their mother had had a stroke. Not the kind that passes quietly. The kind that rearranges a family in a single sentence. Ray sank into a chair like his bones had turned to sand. "We have to go," he said. His mother, Edith, was a sharp woman. A proud woman. She had opinions that could cut glass, and she never believed anyone loved her son the right way. When we arrived at the hospital, Darlene was already there, arms crossed, eyes bright with something that wasn't just worry. Edith survived, but she couldn't live alone afterward. And the question came down like a judge's gavel: who would take her in? Darlene lived 3 states away. She had her reasons, her excuses, her clean hands. Ray looked at me, and I knew what he was asking without him saying a word. What do you do when doing the right thing might break the fragile repair you fought for? We brought Edith home with us. We set up a bed in the den. The house changed overnight, new medications on the counter, a walker leaning by the door, the smell of antiseptic mixed with my simmering soup. At first, we tried. I helped Edith bathe. I cooked softer foods. I listened to the same stories, over and over, because repeating was how her frightened brain held on. Ray handled her appointments and paperwork. He was gentle with her in a way that made my chest ache. But then Edith started doing what she'd always done, testing. One evening, while I was clearing plates, she said, loud enough for Ray to hear, "He was happier before you got so particular." I felt heat climb my neck. Ray pretended he didn't hear. And that pretending, small as it seemed, landed like a stone in my stomach. The worst part was Darlene. She'd call and check in, and somehow every call ended with Ray looking defeated and me feeling blamed. "She says you're controlling," Ray muttered one night, rubbing his temple. I stared at him. "And what did you say?" He hesitated. That hesitation again. That old poison. One night, I walked past the den and heard Ray on the phone. His voice was low, tired, intimate in the way it used to be with me. "I know," he said. "June doesn't really understand." I stopped cold. Because there are 100 ways to betray someone without ever touching another body. My hand went to the wall for balance. And I thought, for one wild moment, maybe the napkin didn't save us. Maybe it just delayed the ending. Ray came into the kitchen after the call. He saw my face and knew. "What?" he asked. I couldn't even keep my voice steady. "I heard you." His shoulders dropped. "June." "No," I said. "Don't June me. Don't make me the problem." Edith called from the den, "Raymond?" Ray looked torn in half. And I realized we were right back at the cliff, different details, same drop. I walked to the drawer and pulled out the napkin. My fingers were trembling so hard it crackled. Ray stared at it like it was a mirror. I read the lines out loud, each one slow as a bell. "No more secrets about money. We tell the truth the first time. No name-calling. No threats of leaving. Every Sunday night, talk and plan. One kindness every day, even when angry." Then I looked him right in the eye and said, "Truth. The first time. So tell me the truth." Ray's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes filled, and his pride tried to stand up one more time, then finally sat down. "I said it because I didn't want to fight," he admitted. "I was tired. I was trying to keep peace with Darlene and Mom and you. And in the process," I whispered, "you made me alone again." Ray nodded, tears spilling now. "I'm sorry," he said. "You do understand. You've been carrying this house like it's on your back." He stepped closer, careful, like you approach an injured animal. "I was wrong," he said. And I'll fix it the right way." "What's the right way?" I asked. Ray took a breath and called Darlene back, right there, with me at the table. He put the phone on speaker, and when she started in, soft voice, sharp words, Ray interrupted. "June isn't controlling," he said, calm and firm. "June is saving my life right now. And if you want to help, you can either contribute or stop criticizing." Silence on the line. Then Darlene huffed, "Fine." But the damage had already been exposed. Ray turned to me after he hung up. His hands hovered, then he took mine. "One kindness," he said quietly. "Even when angry." And I did something I didn't think I could do in that moment. I squeezed his hands back. Because the napkin wasn't magic. It was a decision, made again, and again, and again. Edith lived with us 11 months. Some days were tender. Some were brutal. Ray and I argued about care schedules and privacy and how our kids were adjusting. But when we fought, we came back. We took walks around the block. We sat at the table on Sundays even when we wanted to hide. We didn't do it perfectly. There were days we forgot kindness and had to start over by dinner time. There were apologies that took hours to form. There were nights Ray slept on the couch again, not as punishment, but because his mother was scared in the dark and he stayed near her. And yet, somehow, the house didn't feel like it was splitting anymore. It felt like it was bending, straining, but holding. After Edith passed, Ray stood in the backyard alone for a long time. I watched from the kitchen window. He looked older than his age, shoulders rounded, grief heavy. I went outside and stood beside him without speaking. After a while, he reached for my hand. Not flinching this time. Not pulling away. He said, "Thank you for not letting me ruin us." And I said, "Thank you for staying when it got ugly." Years went by. Molly grew up and moved out. Ben learned to drive, then left for college, then came back for holidays with a different laugh in his mouth, more adult, but still ours. Ray and I became those older couples you might see in a grocery store aisle, bickering gently over which apples to buy. Did the napkin erase everything? No. It didn't erase the fear I still feel when money gets tight. It didn't erase Ray's instinct to carry shame alone. But it gave us a way back to each other when the old habits tried to drag us apart. And that napkin, our private contract, eventually moved from the drawer to my recipe tin. Hidden among index cards and clippings because it was too intimate to display. Some things are sacred because nobody applauds them. Now, in my kitchen this morning, I held it again. The grease stain was still there, a pale shadow. One corner was torn. Patty must have snagged it when she refilled our coffee. The ink had faded, but the promise hadn't. I called Claire back. I didn't tell her everything at first. Some stories need permission from your own heart. But I told her this. Love isn't proved by how loudly you swear it when you're happy. It's proved by what you choose when you're hurt. I told her about the napkin. About the rules. About the Sunday nights. And then I said, if you want your relationship to last, don't just hope. Write the promise. Speak it. Keep it. Because here's what I learned the hard way. When a marriage breaks, it doesn't always break because love died. Sometimes it breaks because honesty got too expensive, and pride started charging interest. So if you're listening to me right now and you're in that quiet distance, two people in the same house, not reaching, let me ask you something. What truth are you avoiding because you're afraid it will hurt? And what is it already costing you to avoid it? I folded the napkin back up, carefully, like tucking in a sleeping child. I slid it into a small plastic sleeve so it won't crumble the next time I open the tin. And I realized why I'm finally telling this story out loud. Not because Ray and I were special. But because we were ordinary. And an ordinary marriage can be saved by an ordinary promise, if you're brave enough to live it. Ray's gone now. It's been 2 years since I held his hand in the hospital and felt it grow lighter, like a bird settling down. Sometimes I still reach across the bed in the morning and feel the empty space before my mind catches up. But when I miss him the most, I think about that diner booth. 2 mugs of coffee. A cheap pen. A napkin that should have been thrown away. And I think, we didn't save our marriage with one grand moment. We saved it with a small written promise and the stubborn courage to keep choosing each other. If this story touched something tender in you, would you do me a small kindness back? Please tap like, it helps more than you'd think, and spend more evenings with us here on Dust of Old Days. And if you want more grandmother style, slow burn family stories, keepsakes, marriage lessons, and the quiet ways people heal, subscribe to Dust of Old Days so you don't miss the next one. I'll leave you with this, from an old woman holding an old napkin. When love gets hard, don't ask if it feels the same. Ask if you're willing to show up anyway. Good night, sweetheart. And if you're trying to repair something, I'm rooting for you.